The lesson begins. The twin suns burn through the glass dome of the elite Zinthari Academy, and inside the main lecture hall, students of 20 species sat upright, their eyes glowing with excitement as Professor Narration prepared his favorite lesson of the term. Today was about death worlds and the creatures that should never have existed, and at the back of the class, alone, silent and unnoticed, sat Jaren, a boy with brown skin, short black hair, and deep eyes that had seen far more than any of them could ever imagine. He wore the standard gray uniform of low-level maintenance trainees, though no one ever really saw him as anything more than background professor. Narration, a tall, pale blue Glavari with 6 fingers on each hand and long robes that shimmered with authority, floated forward and clapped once to silence the murmurs. Welcome, students. Today we study the horrors of Death World Class 5 planets, the most dangerous, most unstable, most violent environments known to the galactic core. And one such place once held a species we believe to be the most savage, intelligent apex predators to ever rise before falling. He waved his hand and a massive hologram appeared above them, showing Earth a green-blue world wrapped in storms and chaos, and then quickly it changed to show wild beasts, torn landscapes, volcanoes, hurricanes, everything designed to kill. And despite all of that, this planet produced humans. The professor continued. Now extinct humans were born from that chaos. They adapted, they survived, they thrived, and eventually they waged wars, not just on each other, but on anything that stood in their way. A species of pure resilience, aggression, and madness, he said with a chuckle. The students laughed. One leaned over to another and whispered, "I heard they used to eat animals raw." Disgusting. Another giggled. "I read they trained their children to fight from the age of 5. From the back, Jaren said nothing. He stared at the hologram of Earth and remembered a sky that never stayed still and winds that could tear apart steel. He remembered home. Professor Narration gestured, and now a new hologram appeared, a human soldier in armor, standing on a battlefield, eyes glowing with fury around him. Alien soldiers lay broken. The professor shook his head. They were unstoppable until they vanished. Some say the final war destroyed them. Others say they left willingly, but none have been seen for over 80 years. And with that, he concluded, the human species is now classified as extinct. The word echoed through the hall. Extinct. Jaren blinked once, then twice, and still said nothing later. In the courtyard during the mid-cycle break, the students gathered near the fountain, laughing about the lesson. A tall, scaled, Dreven student named Tror sneered and said, "If those death apes still lived, we'd turn them into pets in 10 cycles flat." Another added they weren't even that strong, just lucky. Only one student didn't laugh. Her name was Visha, a quiet silver-skinned Leovari girl who always sat near the front and took perfect notes. She glanced around, then slowly walked toward the maintenance corner where Jaren stood silently fixing a panel. She approached slowly and spoke softly. "You were in the lecture, right? What did you think about humans?" Jaren looked up, his eyes calm, voice flat. "They survived." She tilted her head. "That's it, just survived." He stood up taller than she expected, stronger too. "They didn't win by being smarter or faster or more advanced." He said they won because they never gave up even when everything told them to stop. "They survived." Sha blinked. Something in his voice chilled her bones. Behind them, Tror had followed and laughed loud. "Hey janitor boy, you talking about your extinct monkey heroes again?" He shoved Jaren lightly. "Let me help you go extinct too." Jaren didn't move, didn't blink, just stared, and in that stare was something ancient before anything more could happen. A loud screech came from the hedge nearby. A venom lizard, a real one, not a simulation, slithered out, its fangs dripping, ready to strike. The students screamed and backed away, but Jaren moved fast, so fast it was like windy, caught the lizard in one smooth motion, twisted its neck, and dropped it dead. On the ground, silence. No one moved, no one spoke even. Tror's eyes widened with fear. Jaren looked at them all and said with no anger and no pride, "They taught the class about Death World monsters." Unaware one was in the room, and he walked away, leaving them frozen, wondering, what is he, who is he, and why does it feel like history just stepped out of legend and into their lives? Lesson was over, but something far more dangerous had just begun. Mockery turns to fear. The silence that followed Jaren's Departure was not natural. It was thick and heavy, like a storm building behind their eyes. The students stared at the broken venom lizard, still twitching in the courtyard grass, while Jaren vanished around the corner, his steps quiet and steady, as if nothing had happened. Tror, the one who had mocked him the loudest, stood frozen, his fists half-clenched but his fingers trembling slightly. No one spoke for a long time until finally Vesha turned and walked away, her mind spinning with questions. Her heart beating faster than it ever had in all her years at the academy. She spent the rest of her classes distracted, unable to concentrate. Her eyes kept drifting to the seat Jaren had taken earlier, wondering how someone could move that fast. How someone could kill a venom lizard without flinching. Those creatures were used in military training, and often even injured cadets, but Jaren had ended it with his bare hands, like he was swatting a fly when the final bell rang. Vesha didn't go to the dining hall with the others. Instead, she followed a quiet hallway leading to the maintenance quarters. She wasn't sure why. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was fear, or maybe something deeper that she didn't yet understand. She found Jaren sitting alone in a dim corner, his shirt slightly torn from earlier and a small cut on his forearm already healing. She stood silently for a while before finally asking, "What are you?" Jaren looked up, his face unreadable. "Human. That's not possible." She said, "Humans are extinct." "I never said I wasn't extinct," he replied, his voice calm, but there was something behind it, like a volcano under still water. "Why are you here?" she asked. "To learn," Jaren answered. "And something else." "What's something else?" "To see if anything has changed." His words sent a chill through her spine. Before she could ask more, the door slammed open, and 4 students entered, led by Tror, their faces filled with a mixture of fear, anger, and pride. "There he is," Tror growled, trying to act brave. "You think you can scare us with a lizard trick? You're nothing, just a freak. Leave him alone," Vesha said, stepping forward. Tror shoved past her and moved toward Jaren, who stood slowly, his expression calm but cold. "Come on, freak, let's see what else you got," Tror challenged. "Fight me." Jaren didn't move for a moment. Then he stepped forward slowly and spoke in a voice so steady it silenced the room. "I do not fight for pride or games, but if you want pain, you will find it." Rur hesitated, and suddenly his bravado cracked. No one had ever spoken to him like that. No one had looked into his eyes and made him feel like prey. Vesha stepped between them. "Enough, stop this. You don't know what you're doing." Jaren turned and walked away again. And this time no one followed. Later that night in the dorms, whispers spread through the halls. Stories of Jaren grew faster than the lightspeed network. They said he crushed the lizard without blinking. They said his eyes glowed red when angry. They said he was a living weapon sent by an ancient human empire to spy on the aliens. They said he would kill anyone who crossed him. Not all believed the rumors. Some laughed and said it was just exaggerated gossip. Others stayed silent, unsure what to believe. In the archive tower, Vesha sat alone in the research chamber, lit by the soft glow of data screens. She had accessed the restricted files using her late mother's old access code, a secret she never used until now. Curiosity drove her deeper than ever before. She searched for classified reports on Earth, on death worlds, on human biology. What she found changed everything. Images of scorched planets, entire fleets destroyed by small units of human soldiers, beasts genetically modified by humans to survive nuclear radiation environments, where even air burned, and yet humans thrived. She found a report labeled Project Reaper with most of its content redacted, but a single image remained, a blurry photo of a human standing on a battlefield, covered in blood, surrounded by broken machines and burning skis. Vesha zoomed in slowly. The face was hidden by a helmet, but the stance, the shape, the aura looked like Jaren. Her heart pounded as she realized he was not just a human, he was something far more terrifying, a survivor of the final war. She printed the image and hid it in her bag, then shut down the terminal. Halls felt darker, now colder, as she made her way back to her room, her thoughts racing. Why was he really here? What was he planning? And most importantly, was he the last of them, or just the beginning? She reached her room and locked the door, sitting by the window, looking up at the stars, wondering if they had all been wrong about who the monsters really were outside in the shadows. Of the academy, Jaren stood alone, looking up at the same sky. He whispered words no one heard. Soon they will remember. The secret file. Night passed slowly for Vesha, as thoughts twisted through her mind like vines growing without control. She could not sleep, could not breathe, right with the weight of what she had seen pressing down on her chest. The blurry image from the classified file kept flashing in her mind, the shape, the aura, the presence. It was Jaren, or someone exactly like him, and if that photo was real, then he was not just a survivor, he was a remnant of something the galaxy had buried long ago. Something it feared so deeply that it erased every trace of it from its history books. When the academy bell rang the next morning, she walked through the halls as if her feet were floating above the floor. Every alien face around her looked normal, looked at peace, unaware of what might be lurking in the same building with them, unaware of the calm quiet boy who could have turned their bones to dust in seconds. In the lecture hall, Professor Narration began the next lesson calmly. But Vesha could not focus. Her eyes kept drifting toward the maintenance corner, where Jaren sat, not taking notes, not speaking, not blinking, just watching and waiting like a storm inside a cage. Today, the professor said, we explore the failed alliance with Deathworld class 5 species and the reasons it collapsed so quickly. Failed alliance, Vesha whispered to herself, and her curiosity finally broke her silence. She raised her hand. Professor, what happened to the peace talks with the humans before they vanished? Professor Narration paused, visibly surprised that anyone asked a question about humans with sincerity. It was a short discussion, child, he said, clearly uncomfortable. They refused to integrate, refused to kneel to the council. They believed in independence above diplomacy, and when we tried to control them, they responded with war. But what triggered the war? Vesha asked, pressing further. Their pride, he answered with a hint of bitterness, and their power. They believed they had the right to destroy anything that threatened them, and perhaps they did, because they almost succeeded before they vanished. Ed said nothing, but for the first time his fingers tapped lightly on the desk, and Vesha saw it, a rhythm, a code. After class, she rushed outside, catching up to him. In the quiet part of the garden, she pulled the printed image from her satchel and held it out. This was you, wasn't it? Jaren looked down at the paper, his expression unreadable. Then he folded it slowly and said, where did you find this? The restricted archives, Vesha whispered, heart pounding. I needed to know what you are. What I am, he repeated, not angry, not amused, just thoughtful. I am the last breath of a sleeping storm, and the reason they lie to you. Why are you here, Jaren? Why now? She asked. The galaxy forgot what fear feels like. His words were soft but heavy as stone. Vesha shivered. Come with me, she said. I need to show you something. They moved quickly through the lower halls, reaching a forgotten wing of the academy locked away for years. Vesha used her mother's code again, and the heavy doors hissed open, revealing an old archive room covered in dust and silence. They entered and turned on the power. Faint lights flickered, revealing rows of metal cabinets, ancient data scrolls, and shattered holoscreens. They pulled a file from the corner shelf, a thick manual titled Human Combat Patterns Level 17. Jaren read the first few lines and smiled faintly. They still think this was the worst we could do. What does that mean? Vesha asked it. It means they never saw the real battles, he replied, only the surface only. What we let them survive. She looked at him and saw not a boy, not a student, but something forged in flame and sharpened by endless wardo. You plan to destroy them? She asked finally. Not unless they try again, Jaren answered. I am here because I need to know if peace was ever possible, if your kind ever learned from the fire we left behind. Vesha stepped closer, unsure of her own voice. But you cannot do this alone. Jaren, the council will come for you. They will panic, and panic always leads to blood. Then let them come, Jaren said. I am not hiding. I came here in the open. I gave them a chance to look me in the eye and decide what they fear more, the truth or the one who speaks it. Suddenly the archive room lights flickered again, and an alert rang softly. Through the panel above the door, unauthorized access detected. They were being watched. Vesha turned to Jaren, her voice shaking. What now? he said calmly. They begin to remember. Outside in the towers of the council, alarms began to flash. Eyes turned toward the academy, and within minutes a secret message was sent across the sector. Subject identified unknown human, confirmed, initiate protocol extinction echo. But deep inside the academy, as fear spread like wildfire, one quiet girl and one ancient force prepared for the storm that was already coming. Training room lockdown. The academy changed overnight. Whispers turned into warnings, and warnings turned into silent orders. Hallways that once echoed with laughter now held tension so thick it clung to every wall, as if the building itself knew something ancient had awakened. Jaren walked through the corridors unnoticed, yet impossible to ignore. Every step he took was watched, every breath measured by unseen eyes, and above it all the council had already made its move inside the administrative tower. A hidden directive was issued, not to the teachers, not to the students, but to the security corps, deep underground. A quiet order, labeled Protocol Extinction Echo, had been activated, and its first test was simple: provoke, analyze, and if needed, eliminate. While the academy ran its daily routine, the plan unfolded in the background. A carefully arranged challenge disguised as an accident, an invitation to a training simulation with several elite students, including Jaren's message, reached him through a glowing strip on his door. Compulsory training assessment, Sector 12 report, at mid-cycle, and Jaren smiled without humor as he read it. He folded the slip, placed it on the desk, and walked out without a word. Vesha, who had been waiting nearby, fell into step beside him. Are you going? She asked, already knowing the answer. Yes, he replied. They want to see a monster. I will give them a mirror. She hesitated, and then followed him against her better judgment. The hall seemed longer, colder, as they moved toward the simulation chambers deep beneath the academy, where military tests were held for high-level cadets. When they arrived, the room was already prepared, a dome-shaped arena with adjustable terrain, currently set to mimic a desert canyon. Sharp rocks, uneven ground, and heat radiating from the walls. Jaren stepped inside without hesitation. The door slid shut behind him, sealing with a quiet hissing the observation room above. Tror stood with 3 other students dressed in light armor, all smirking with confidence. The head instructor nodded at them. This is just an evaluation test. Show what you can do, but be careful. This simulation includes an auto-generated apex predator. Vsha pushed her way into the observation room, heart-pounding, eyes wide. What are you doing? You cannot throw him in there without knowing what he is. Instructor turned annoyed. This is Academy protocol, girl. If he wants to claim power, let him earn it inside the dome. The floor trembled. A low growl echoed through the chamber, and then from the shadows emerged a creature not from any known world. It was part machine, part beast, created in labs for stress testing. It stood twice the size of a Dreven, covered in synthetic muscles and razor plates. Jaren stood still, arms at his sides, eyes locked on the creature as it roared and charged at him, claws tearing into the earth. Everyone in the room leaned forward, expecting panic, dodging fear, but they saw Nani. Jaren did not move until the last second, and then he was gone, his body a blur of motion, faster than the eye could track. He appeared behind the beast, striking once a blow so precise it shattered the creature's balance. He moved again, twisting, dodging, flipping with unnatural grace. The beast lunged again. Jaren caught its arm, twisted, and tore it free with a soundless scream, then used the severed limb to crush its head with one brutal strike. The simulation ended instantly. The lights shifted. The floor froze. The instructors stared in stunned silence. Door to the arena opened. Jaren stepped out without a scratch, his face blank, eyes unreadably. Vsha ran to him. Are you all right? Yes, he answered. They made their choice. The head instructor stood frozen, unsure whether to applaud or run. He turned on his communicator and muttered something too low to hear. Within moments, the emergency lights flared across the academy. The protocol had shifted from observation to engagement, and the students, watching from nearby hallways, scattered in fear. Back in the council tower, the report arrived. Subject Jaren confirmed as combat level Omega. Initiate extraction. Prepare neutralization unit. But Jaren was already ahead. He turned to Vesha. We do not have time. They are coming now. Where will you go? She asked. I will not run. Jaren replied. I came here to learn, but if they force my hand, I will teach them the price of fear. Together they moved through the underground tunnels of the academy toward the old war memorial wing, a forgotten section filled with relics of battles. Past Vesha spoke breathlessly. What are we doing? Harry stopped before a sealed chamber, placed his hand on a scanner hidden beneath dust, and said one word in an old human dialect. Doors slid open, revealing a suit of armor unlike anything the galaxy had seen for decades. It shimmered with layered metals, etched with names and memories. Stepped forward and touched the chestplate once, then turned to her. If they want to bury history again, they will have to survive it, and for the first time, Vesha saw the truth, not just in his strength, not just in his speed, but in his purpose. Jaren was not a survivor. He was a warning. The council intervenes. The war memorial wing shook with the echoes of ancient energy as Jaren stepped into the chamber where forgotten relics of past battles lay untouched for decades. The armor before him stood tall, molded from a composite only the humans ever understood, etched with battle lines and names of fallen warriors. It was more than metal. It was memory, legacy, and fire wrapped in silence. Visha watched as he placed one hand on the chestplate, and the armor responded, unfolding around his body piece by piece. It locked into place with a sound that felt like thunder trapped in glass. The moment the final piece settled around his shoulders, the chamber lights flickered once, then turned red. Alarms screamed across the academy. Corridors and in the tower above, the High Council stood in a circle of ancient minds, trying to decide what could not be decided. Activated the relic, the Dreven counselor growled. He accessed a restricted vault that has not opened in 80 years. Is preparing for war. The Glavari elder hissed. You saw what he did to the simulation unit. We must strike now before he reaches full potential, another shouted. So the orders were given not to capture, not to study, not to speak, just neutralize with all available force. The security units were dispatched, elite enforcers in exo suits armed with particle blades and shock cannons. They stormed through the academy halls, turning everything into a war zone. Students screamed and scattered. Instructors ran for safety while the council declared martial lockdown. Protocol extinction. Echo had shifted to final phase. Inside the memorial wing, Jaren stood still, armor fully formed, eyes glowing with silent rage, the red light of the alarms dancing across his helmet. Vesha stood beside him, fear trembling in her chest, but something else too, something stronger than fear. What are we going to do? She asked, voice quiet. I told you, he replied. They will have to survive it. The door behind them burst open, and 5 enforcers entered, weapons drawn. Their leader stepped forward, voice amplified by a helmet. This is your only warning. Surrender now or be terminated. Jaren turned his head slowly, looked at them, and spoke with a voice that echoed from 1,000 graves. I gave your kind a century to forget fear. Now I will remind you what it feels like. And then he moved. Enforcers fired first blasts of energy, lighting the chamber, but Jaren weaved through them with impossible grace. His hands struck like lightning. 1, 2, 3 down within seconds. Armor crushed, weapons broken, bodies motionless. Last guard hesitated too long, and Jaren lifted him by the throat. You were not ready, he whispered, and let him fall unconscious. Vesha stared, unable to move, unable to breathe. He is going to destroy them all, she thought, not because he wants to, but because they forced him to. Jaren walked past the broken soldiers, stepped into the hallway, and kept moving. Each step a warning, each breath a storm gathering. Force more troops came, wave after wave, each one more desperate than the last. Drones, turrets, kinetic traps. None of it slowed him down. He was not walking through the academy. He was carving a message into its bones. In the sky above, dropships circled the towers, and distant sirens screamed across the city. The council had underestimated what they had awakened, and now it was too late to put the fire back into the torch. Inside the central command chamber, the council watched the footage helplessly. One by one, their security feeds went dark, static and silence, replacing every attempt to stop the human. He is a death world class 5 anomaly, the Dreven elder whispered. He should not exist. He exists, the Liavari elder answered, and we brought him Here thinking we could cage a storm, we must evacuate. Another shouted, we must preserve the records. But Jaren was already coming. Moved through the last barricade as if it were paper. The final group of guards dropped their weapons and ran without command, and when he entered the grand chamber of the council, Vaishya followed behind him, heart pounding, eyes wide. The council stood frozen, ancient robes trembling as the armored figure approached. Jiren removed his helmet, and for the first time they saw his face, not twisted with hate, not burning with bloodlust, but calm. He looked at each one of them and said, this is what happens when you build your future on lies, when you erase truth, when you turn history into myth, and use fear as your ruler. The Glavari elder stepped forward, shaking. We did what we thought was best. You thought wrong, Jaren said, and his voice filled the entire halley. Did not come to destroy. I came to see if your kind deserved the peace we offered long ago. I see now that you do not understand peace until it stands before you unarmed, and you still raise your blades. What will you do now? The Liavari elder asked, voice barely a whisper. Jaren looked up toward the stained glass dome above them, through which the twin suns now shone like judgment. The truth unleashed. The chamber fell into a silence so heavy that even the air seemed to pause. The ancient walls lined with glowing symbols seemed to dim under the weight of his words. Jaren stood in the center, his armor reflecting the twin suns through the glass dome above. His voice had no anger, no pride, no fear, only truth, and it cut deeper than any blade could ever reach. Vesha stood behind him, her hands trembling, but her eyes locked onto the faces of the council members who had ruled for generations without challenge. They looked so small now, so lost in their own creation of lies and forgotten truths. You taught the galaxy that humans were extinct. You buried every record, every story, every warning, Jaren said slowly, pacing across the hall. Your leaders believed erasing us would prevent fear, would preserve your false peace. But fear is not your enemy, ignorance is. Glavari elder tried to step forward, his voice cracking under the pressure. You must understand, it was never personal. Your kind was unstable, too powerful, too unpredictable. We believed the galaxy could not survive with humans still among us. Then you were wrong. Jaren replied, because the galaxy does not survive without us. It simply decays slowly until it forgets how to fight, how to adapt, how to survive. He raised one hand and tapped the side of his helmet, projecting a hologram into the air. Images filled the chamber, scenes of Earth, not as a death world, but as a home. Children playing in burned cities, mothers rebuilding homes, soldiers rescuing the wounded, even as the sky fell in fire and ruin. This is what you feared, he continued, not our strength, but our will, not our weapons, but our refusal to bow even when broken. Leovari elder stared at the images, tears forming in her eyes. We were told you were violent, mindless, driven by destruction. We were never mindless. Jaren said, we felt everything, we cried, we screamed when our worlds burned, but we never stopped. And that is what makes us dangerous, not because we destroy, but because we endure. He turned to Vesha, who had stepped closer, her voice calm and steady. Now why did you come back, Jaren? Why reveal yourself now after all these years? Because time runs in circles, he said, and the moment always returns when history demands to be faced. I came because I wanted to see if anything had changed, if those who feared us had learned, if those who inherited the stars had grown. But now I see they only learned new ways to hide their fear. One of the council members, a younger one with sharp eyes and a quiet voice, spoke for the first time. And what now? Will you lead us? Will you conquer? U.S. Jaren looked at him, not with hatred, but something deeper. I will not lead, I will not conquer. I came to remind the galaxy that truth does not disappear because you wish it away. I am one voice, but I carry 1,000 echoes behind me, and they are not silent. He stepped forward and placed something on the council table, a small device, simple looking, harmless. This is a beacon, he said. If ever again you choose lies over truth, violence over peace, fear over understanding, this beacon will activate, and my people will return. The Glavari elder gasped, your people, but you are the last. Jaren turned and began to walk away, his voice floating behind him like a distant thunder echo. You believe that because we let you believe it. Vesha followed him out, her heart racing with questions, her mind barely able to grasp the weight of what just happened. They walked through the academy halls, now quiet and empty, students hiding behind walls, instructors whispering behind doors, the whole structure trembling. Not from physical damage, but from the collapse of illusion. Jaren, where are you going? She asked. Away, he said. My message is delivered. My presence is known. Now the galaxy must decide if it wants peace or another lesson in survival. Will I see you again? She asked. He stopped and looked at her, and for the first time, his eyes softened. You were the only one who asked, who wondered, who searched. Then he reached into a small pouch at his side and handed her a shard of his armor, smooth, cold, and glowing with faint blue light. If the day comes when you need us again, hold this, and we will know. With that, he stepped into the courtyard where the twin suns met the stone floor, and in the brightness of that moment, he seemed to vanish. Vesha stood alone now. The council shaken, the academy changed, and the galaxy forever marked by the return of a truth it tried so hard to erase. Somewhere far beyond the outer system, signals pulsed silently through dark space, and old stars began to stir the legend. Begins. The academy never returned to normal after that day, though repairs were made and alarms silenced, though the council issued statements claiming a training anomaly, though files were scrubbed and records rewritten. The truth remained not in the systems, not in the headlines, but in the minds of those who saw him, in the hearts of those who heard his voice, in the soul of the galaxy itself. Something had changed. Something had awakened. Students whispered of the boy who caught a venom lizard with one hand, who tore through simulation beasts without breaking a sweat, who stood before the highest rulers of the core worlds and spoke not with fury, but with truth, so sharp it split the illusion wide open. Vesha was no longer just a student. She became a voice, one who had witnessed the fall of a lie and the rise of something forgotten. She carried the shard of armor Jaren had given her, always around her neck, glowing faintly when she walked through the great halls. Professors nodded now, not with arrogance but respect. Even the older students stepped aside when she passed, not out of fear but reverence. She had seen the storm and survived, not by hiding but by standing near it. News spread slowly, then all at once small rebel colonies began finding hidden messages embedded in ancient signals, coordinates leading to empty spaces where monuments now stood, each monument marked with one symbol, a hand wrapped in flame. The old mark of Earth across the galaxy. More began to whisper that the humans were not extinct, that they had simply stepped back, waiting for the right time to return. And across these world stories bloomed a freighter lost in dark space, found its path lit by a ghostly beacon said to carry a human signal. A pirate king known for slaughter vanished after attacking a derelict ship rumored to house a single sleeping passenger. A plague ravaging a mining colony stopped overnight when an unknown figure walked into the infirmary and left behind strange glowing herbs that healed all within hours. The council tried to silence these tales, but the more they fought, the stronger the legends grew, because truth cannot be erased, only delayed. And now that it had returned, it would not go quiet. Livesha stood at the edge of the academy courtyard, staring up at the twin suns, remembering the way Jaren had disappeared into the light. He had walked not like a boy, not like a soldier, but like a messenger who had delivered what needed to be said. Beside her, a small child asked quietly, "Is it true? Were humans really monsters?" Knelt beside him and smiled. No, not monsters, but they lived on a world that tried to kill them every day, and they survived. And when the stars turned against them, they did not vanish, they became stronger. The child blinked wide-eyed. Where did he go? She placed a hand over the shard around her neck. He went where legends sleep and where truth waits to be heard again. The boy nodded and ran off, joining the others, leaving Vesha alone with the silence that no longer felt empty, in the far edges of space where light bends and time slows. A hidden moon shifted from sleep. Its surface rippled and opened, revealing vast caverns filled with machines, armor, weapons, and silence. And deep within a single chamber, lights flared awake, one by one, illuminating rows of sleeping warriors. Their bodies still, their minds calm, their chests rising in unison. Standing among them, his eyes glowing softly, his armor darker than space itself, stood Jaren, watching, waiting, listening, because he knew the galaxy was not finished. Peace was not a gift, it was a decision, a choice, one that had to be protected, not with war, but with strength, with memory, with truth. He turned toward the stars above the chamber and whispered into the silence, "They will remember," and across the galaxy, as old systems rebooted and forgotten files unlocked, the name Earth began to return, not as a curse, but as a warning, not as a myth, but as a promise. And somewhere deep in the minds of every species who once believed they ruled the stars, a new thought began to take root. The Death World monsters were not gone. They were watching, and one was already among them. The legend had begun, and this time it would not end. In silence it would echo through the stars until the last sun faded, and even then the name would remain human. Would you like an SEO YouTube description and thumbnail prompt for this story now? The message that echoed in the centuries that followed. Jaren's return, his name passed from whispers to songs, from secret files to sacred teachings across the stars. His memory was not just kept, it was guarded, carried like fire in the hands of those who understood what he was, what he stood for, and what he had given. Some called him a warrior, others a prophet. Some believed he was the last of his kind, while others believed he was only the first to rise again. But all of them remembered his words, not because they were loud, but because they were true. In every academy that once mocked the human species, new lessons were now taught about strength that did not shout, about patience that burned brighter than war, about survival, not as violence, but as sacred. Wilvisha became more than a student. She became the keeper of the shard, the last one to hear his voice and see the fire behind his eyes. She traveled from system to system, retelling what she had seen, what she had learned, and in doing so she lit the flame of remembrance on 1,000 worlds. On a quiet moon far from the reach of council law, a temple was built, not in his name, but in honor of the truth he awakened. It had no statues, no golden banners, only silence, and at the center a single phrase carved into the stone wall with no explanation: "We did not fail." And beneath that wall, the shard he had given her was placed, still glowing, still warm, as if it waited for the hand that would call him back, because the galaxy knew now that peace was not eternal unless guarded, that fear did not vanish unless faced, and that there was a name spoken quietly when all others failed, when the weak needed hope, when the strong became cruel, when the stars turned cold again. That name would return, and so it echoed human. The end.